Good morning. Well, today I'd like to talk a little bit about how the matrix forms inside of the foods and the drinks and the products that are all available, and about how natural products that are truly natural, not just labeled as natural, bring us back to harmony, bring us back to nature. So the basic principle is that anything that is from the earth, anything that is true, anything that is in the vibration that's going to help us is going to help us. So the more things that we do that are from the earth and of nature and of natural aspects of being, these are all going to be supportive of us. So they all have a layered effect. So we might not just feel going on a walk for the park enough to compensate for dealing with a whole stressful day at work, but if we have a cup of tea, we go for a walk at the park, we sit down on the bench and meditate with a tree for a little bit, now we're getting to the point where we've layered a few things and we might have started to balance out some of the intensity from the matrix. So it's one of the reasons why it's important to be conscious of our diet. It's important to increase the consciousness in multiple areas of our lives, multiple aspects of our being. All the time we want to be improving, expanding our consciousness, literally expanding our knowledge and our capabilities. And diet is one of the most helpful ways to do it. It's not necessary. There are many different paths to ascension, but it supports virtually all paths. The diet will allow the process to happen much easier because it's one and the same. Any path to ascension is combining with other paths. So by eating more healthy foods, we're supporting our body directly, giving it more of the fuel that it needs and less of the toxins that it doesn't need. We're giving it less work and we're giving it more fuel. And so this is it's considered a universal thing. It's not, there's a whole emotional component to it. And so this is where we have this giant divide of people saying, no, I'm not going to change the way I eat, and feeling defensive about their identity based around the food and the comfort it brings. We figure out how to deal with a lot of intensity in our life with food. So again, I want to just point out that food is the second chakra. Food is the emotions. It is the heart that sustains us. So food is not really that necessary for life. I'm not going to say that everyone can just stop eating now, but in the long term, if we choose to take a spiritual path to ascension that includes diet, we can reduce our diets eating very, very little and be plenty healthy. I think I've said this before. I'm fairly physically active. I have a very simple workout routine that involves carrying water jugs, and it keeps me in really, really good shape. I barely do it ever. I barely eat protein. I've studied diet, nutrition, and workout extensively throughout my life, and now what I found is that nothing that I read is really true. It is true in the ways that it is true, but I don't really need all of those things to have plenty of muscle mass. I can be increasing my muscle mass without eating, protein, really. Barely eating protein. Nuts and seeds have like a 1-to-3 ratio of protein to fat, and that, on average of the ones that I eat, and that's not much protein. Every once in a while I might have a hard-boiled egg or something like that, but generally my body doesn't crave protein like it used to now that I've made all these biological and spiritual shifts. It's just retuned my body. The keto diet talks about this. If you want to know more about the science of this, the keto body talks about the keto diet. I'm not a big proponent of the keto diet, but it does talk about how the body can be reconditioned to fats instead of proteins, and then it does the same thing with them. Alright, so it's really important to eat the cleanest, freshest, high-quality food we can find. Organic is not a frilly thing, and not if we have enough money to thing. Organic means that there's less of the matrix sprayed on our food. So if we want to be exiting the matrix and entering into more of a bliss state and more of a building the now, building something that works instead of perpetuating a broken system, making sure to only buy organic is one of the very simple things we can do. Making sure to use clean products is one of the first basic things we can do. Look at all of our soaps and try to find the highest quality soap that we can find that has the least amount of chemicals. We want to be spending a little bit of extra money on the things that are going into our body. So our care products, our cleaning products, and our foods are all going into our body. They're going into our skin, into our air. So when we wash a load of laundry, the drainage pipe is just loose. You know, the pipe is sitting into a pipe that's larger than it. So all those chemicals that are washing those clothes are evaporating into the air, And there's been studies that have shown that after about a dozen loads of laundry with the modern detergents, the highly chemical detergents, after about a dozen, there's the equivalent of a whole cup worth of laundry soap in residue left over in your clothing. So all those chemicals that are being used to wash are now in the clothing pretty much permanently. It takes a lot of washes to get that stuff out, because they use pretty gross chemicals. So we really want to be careful. There are so few good products out there. I've said this about food, that 99% of food that's available is garbage. So we really have to find that health food store. We really need to look for the farmers markets and ask everybody if they're organic. If they don't have a sign saying they're organic, check in with them, see if you trust them. If they say they're no spray or something like that, we really don't want to be eating food that has chemicals that are designed to kill life on them. It's something that we can do to help our bodies. It's a little favor. It's a form of self-care. It's a form of spiritual ascension by saying, hey, look, spirit, I'm not going to eat this thing that's killing us all. I'm gonna make my money speak by buying something that's killing everybody less. It's really practical and basic. And with our soap and our healthcare products, it's the same. I think it's often overlooked. There are just virtually no companies that are incentivized to do things in a healthy way, and all the companies are incentivized to do things in an unhealthy way, because there are massive barrels full of these toxic chemicals that were made, during the chemical revolution. They have large quantities of these things, and they're constantly making more of them for whatever pharmaceuticals or whatever warfare or whatever. I'm not up on the subject, but they produce a lot of chemical byproducts, mass quantities of chemical byproducts, which they can't physically use. So they put them into our cleaning products and our care products. As weird as that might sound, it's really weird, because many of these chemicals are too toxic to be put into the landfill. They are not accepted at the landfill, but they put them in very small quantities, and the FDA approves it and says, okay, this toxic chemical that causes skin irritation and might cause long-term mutation, if it's under this quantity, if it's this small amount, it's okay. I think that's just insanity. I think that's about the same as saying, okay, well, this chemical just kills a lot of life, but we don't know if it kills the rest of life. Let's just put it on our food anyways. So I've been talking about this kind of a lot, but it's kind of important, and I don't think that it's been described the way that I'm describing it. I think that it's talked about from an emotional perspective for the most part, and I wanted to bring just a little bit more of the practical application, the practical comparison of Jane Goodall says, how could a culture ever accept spraying poison on food that we eat? And it's such a simple piece of logic. Anyway, so we can exit the matrix by cleaning up what comes into our body. We don't have control over what other people use and wear. We don't have control over what the city's pollution is when we're driving, any of that stuff. But what we do have control over is what we put in our bodies and what we're putting on our bodies. So this is one way that we can exit the matrix, is really decide that we want to be, fighting for the earth and fighting for ourselves. Fighting for the health of human beings is one way that I would put this. So we really want to be focused on what is going to help me be more alive and happy and healthy, and what in the same is going to be helpful for everyone else. So again, one of the healthiest things that we can do is find forms of food that really help us. So I'm not sure if I've talked about affinity before, but affinity is when something is so helpful for us, and when we like something so much that it boosts us a lot, and it may defy other categories, it may defy other systems. So I've had sensitive digestion for much of my life, and I found very young age that peppermint tea was really effective for soothing the digestive difficulties. And typically peppermint is considered a very strong, very intense herb, and many people that have digestive difficulty or inflammation, it's just too intense for, and they can't handle it. So the fact that my body just soaked it up and loved it, even though it was already kind of irritated and sensitive, told me that I have an affinity for this herb, and this is great. So I found this out when I was 5 years old or 6 years old and had a stomach ache, and I've been using it ever since. It's like my favorite herb. I use tons of herbs. Fresh herbs are one of the best ways we can help our body, because they're enzyme rich and they're just packed with so many good things. A fresh herb is one of the fastest ways to good health through digestion. We can literally have a salad made out of fresh herbs with just a little bit of like romaine or a little bit of bok choy to ground it out, a little bit of olive oil, and this will be one of the healthiest things we can do. If we want to think about fasting or cleansing, or we're not feeling that great and we want a quick boost, we can try just making an all herbal salad. An all herbal salad, it can be a very small salad because herbs are very, very potent and concentrated in their fresh form. Another thing we can do is dried herbs. Dried herbs used in food are not the best thing to be doing because they're highly carbonized. The life part of them is mostly gone. There's a little bit of the essential oil left, and there's a lot of carbon left over. So fresh herbs are just, dramatically better than dried herbs. And fresh herbs, if we can keep them alive and not cook them, that is ideal. Stir them into sauces after the sauce is done cooked. Sprinkle and dice it up and sprinkle it on top as much as we can. Most herbs that are fresh are best fresh. Dried herbs are best in tea because that way we're not consuming all that carbon. I know that cows consume a lot of carbon, but we as humans don't benefit from consuming carbon. So it often forms as a rough irritation for our digestive system, requiring that our body puts forth a little bit of extra mucus, and it throws our body off ever so slightly. So extra carbon. Same with fiber. Fiber just takes work to process. It doesn't give us anything. So vegetable fiber is not particularly healthy. This is why juicing is such a big fad, because it's all the power of vegetables without the fiber. Is literally the difference between eating a vegetable and drinking vegetable juice is the fiber. So stringing out those strings from the celery before eating it is a great way to just absorb more of the nutrients. Juicing, we really want to be drinking that juice within 10 minutes of it juicing because it starts to decay. Once those cell structures are completely demolished, that stuff starts to decay very rapidly unless it's getting very cold. If you're juicing and freezing and you have a way to flash freeze the juice, that is an acceptable way, but 10 minutes is considered the metric where you're losing the enzymes and you're getting decay start to happen. So you want to be really careful about that. So tea is one of the best ways so we can use dried herbs because we can get their essential oils out, we can get their minerals out, we can get some of the good stuff that's still left without getting all that carbon. And also, dried herbs often are not that well sorted, so there'll be bits of thicker stems, and there'll be bits of weeds, and there'll be bits of this and that, so we don't really want to be consuming too many dried herbs in our diet. Oftentimes when they harvest herbs for use of dried herbs, they harvest them fairly late, so they're a larger plant matter, more plant matter, and you often get it more in the later seed stages where it's more tough and shouldn't be really eaten anyways. So we can really help ourselves by eating real quality food, eating high quality food, drinking herbal teas as much as possible. In the Ayurvedic tradition, this is like one of the fastest ways to health, is fresh herbs and herbal teas and spices as much as possible, and being really aware of how much toxicity there is in pretty much everything else. I know in the United States we have stores that are called like cash and carry, and we have big distributors called U.S. Foods, and these foods, they sell, cash and carry is known for being ridiculously cheap, and most local restaurants use them no matter what variety of food they sell, no matter if it's Thai or American or Italian. Just incredibly low quality. It's just like eating out is not the best idea unless you really know where the food is coming from. It's usually they cut corners on the quality of the food, and U.S. Foods is a major U.S. food distributor for companies, and there's a number of other ones, but I've worked in restaurants, and there's no quality standard. Their sense of quality is it grade B? Is it grade A? Is it grade A fancy? Which has to do with what size it is and how uniform it is, and has nothing to do with how potent it is and how healthy it is. So we really want to be careful going to restaurants. We want to know that if we're eating out, unless we know what the cooks are doing because we've talked to them, the food is going to be very low quality, and we just want to plan on that. It's not a horrible thing to go out and eat out and eat food that's not the best for us. It's not the best for us, but we just want to be aware. Awareness is a really powerful tool. We want to get used to the fact that if we're doing things that we know better, it's okay, but we want to map them out and say, okay, I'm going to go out and eat this taco because I haven't had Mexican food in a year or whatever, and I really want to have a taco, but I know it's probably going to upset my digestion a little bit. I know there's some things in there that it's not very good for me. I know it's probably GMO corn and all these things. So I'm maybe going to take a little bit of peppermint essential oil beforehand to ease it a little bit, and maybe make sure to drink plenty of herbal tea, maybe have a little salad, green salad with it, or sprinkle plenty of herbs, eat plenty of herbs, get some little digestive aids, sprinkle some ginger. There's all kinds of things we can do when we put our consciousness there. When we spread our awareness to an area, there's just no limit to what we can uncover. But the more we cleanse our body, the more we nourish and restore and cleanse our body, the easier it is to access our higher functions, our higher brain function. We can think clearer, think faster. We can receive information from the universe better. It is easier to be in source flow when our digestive system is not taken up too much of our attention. So finding the foods that really work for us. It can be a lifelong study of figuring out which foods our body responds really well to, and then constantly kind of making adjustments or thinking about changes we can make by adding new foods. There's so many different kinds of foods, and I mean, I have so many times found a food that I didn't know existed, and it changed the way I thought about food. My whole diet changed, not because I had to change my diet, because I found something I love so much that I found a way to work it in. Coconut oil is one of these things that has profoundly changed my diet. It can be used for so many things, and I don't particularly like the taste of butter, so I just, switch straight over to coconut oil with no hesitation. So there are so many different things we can do to take steps towards ascension and to exit the matrix of fear belief systems, and the food we eat actually does keep us in a low vibrational state, which keeps us in a less curious state, which keeps us in a state that's more prone to be reactionary and in fear. If our bodies are not healthy, if we're experiencing chronic inflammation because the food we eat is irritating, if we're experiencing difficulty waking up in the morning or difficulty going to sleep because we've got food in us that's not supposed to be in us, chemical additives that aren't even supposed to be there, so it's interrupting with our natural sleep cycle and our ability to feel rested. I mean, this is something that most of the people that I've talked to say they rely on coffee, or they rely on a struggle to get up in the morning, or they do something, and this is primarily because of leftover toxins in our digestive system. My experience has been when I fast, I need hardly any sleep. I've got tons of energy. When I get back into eating more food again, I need a little bit more rest. Everything takes a little bit more work. So I'm constantly in play with this and what it really takes to sustain me. How can I lead a physically active lifestyle? How can I be consistently adding a little bit of muscle mass so make my daily life a little bit easier, so I can lift things and do things a little bit easier? And it's just a constant dance, and again, it'll bring up a whole nother subject of emotion and eating, and why I think there's a path to ascension where we don't eat anymore that largely has to do with emotion. It's dealt with less by dealing with the emotions than it is by running a whole system. Sun gazing, I believe, is also one of the combined paths to ascension of diet, where we're just limiting what we eat to the point where we're just so efficient at absorbing sunlight that we don't need a whole lot else. We're grounded with the earth, so we're releasing our toxins. We don't need to use our digestive system to release our toxins, because every day we're getting lots of earth grounding time. Literally, free radicals are inflammation is just being absorbed by the earth. We do this enough, and sun gazing is a way of feeding on sunlight in a very specific way. So sun gazing as a spiritual path, I think it's like a 9-month or a 12-month initiation process that's very specific and very scientific in the way that's gone about, that leads to us needing very little or no food. This is something I love to try, but it requires living somewhere close where you can see an open horizon, so you can really be playing with that early sunlight and late sunlight when it's filtered very heavily and very safe to look at. That last 15 or 20 minutes of sun, or the first 15 or 20 minutes of sun on the horizon, when it's going through so much thick atmosphere that it's actually safe to look at. But it's, again, something that's very technical, and we want to do a lot of research and have someone who's guiding and supporting us through this process, as it is very specific. Again, the sun gazing method was developed by a medical medical doctor in India, and it is very typical after having a successful professional career in India to then adopt a guru and go for spiritual development. So you take all the practical knowledge of a professional field and then you endeavor to embark upon the journeys of the spiritual mystery. All right, well, it has been wonderful this morning. I'm going to transition on. I hope you have a wonderful morning.